The creativity, the vibe, the heat, the crowds.
13 million Australians are in lockdown this evening.
Scores of cancelled events and festivals.
The industry says it's on the brink.
We just need to be able to work again.
In lockdown states, venues poised to open their doors once more.
We are opening up, in no doubt about that.
We're nearly there.
Once those 70 and 80% targets are hit, events are back, but crowd numbers capped. Even at 90% double vaxxed, density limits may remain. And for now, only those who are fully vaccinated will be able to take part. So is it possible to live with the virus and have big-scale fun? Overseas, life is roaring back with revellers gathering in their thousands.
In the era of COVID-19, there's a lot of factors you have to take into account. What type of an event is it? What type of activity is going to be occurring? Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? When is it occurring? Is there a new variant that's circulating at that time that may be more contagious?
A UK pilot scheme spending 4 months trialling the return of big events.
We are back!
Across 37 trial events, including sporting comps, festivals and live theatre, case numbers were found to be largely in line with community infection rates. At the British Grand Prix, only 585 cases recorded, the scheme concluding mass events can be safe. All participants were fully vaxxed or had to show proof of a negative test taken within 48 hours. But not all events were equal, the government noting
A cautious approach should be taken at unstructured events.
When you are vaccinated, any breakthrough infection is going to be very mild and manageable. So I think that's the key lesson here.
In July, a 400,000-strong crowd swarmed Chicago for Lollapalooza, one of the first major festivals to take place stateside this year.
2021!
And despite a summer surge in Delta cases across the country,
there's no evidence at this point of a super spreader event.
There have only been 203 attendees who have tested positive.
90% of the crowd fully vaccinated. So we know the ticket to the show is Vaccination, but no event is going to be completely risk-free. However, with proactive planning, we can manage crowds and COVID successfully. And there's a whole toolkit of measures we already know about that we can use. Social distancing, masks, rapid antigen testing, moving events outdoors, and if you can't, increasing ventilation indoors.
They're not going to make your event have a magic force field around it to keep COVID-19 out. But what you can do is minimize the impact that those cases have on, for example, the hospitals in the surrounding area.
But across the world, countries are wrestling with the dilemma of a two-tier society. The UK government ditching plans to introduce vaccine passports for nightclubs and crowded events.
Most people probably instinctively don't like the idea.
In London, the government had devolved responsibility to each venue to decide the kind of regime they wanted to operate.
The Adelaide Festival's Rachel Healy has seen the return of big events overseas. And in the UK, it hasn't been smooth sailing.
Some venues require proof of vaccine and masks. Others had social distancing. Others didn't have anything. There was mass confusion, as you would expect.
But at least a dozen countries in the EU are now operating some form of vaccine entry pass. The difference, stark.
In Europe, events were running at 100% capacity. It was really seamlessly done. It built confidence that we could return to those entertainment venues and we could do so as safely as possible.
Here in Australia, there are plans to include vax certificates in our check-in apps. But as for how and when they'll be implemented, the states are going it alone. In New South Wales, once it hits 90% double dosed, it's up to industry to decide who they allow in. And for the events sector, that's a problem. They're a national sector working across borders. They say they need a nationally consistent system to survive.
If we want to get audiences back, we need to minimise confusion, and the single best way of doing that is having a system that is understood by everyone in a country like ours. We can communicate that easily, and why wouldn't we grab a model like that?
The path back to big events here as we begin to really live with COVID, a major work in progress.
It's always so weird seeing people together having fun so close. It's interesting, what happens then with isolate, like so say there's a case at a theatre and they've got a show every night for the next, do they then have to have it cleaned and then shut down again for weeks, or do we just roll with it? If you've been on a night where there's people in the audience with COVID, do you have to have 2 weeks quarantine, or like how will it work?
I can't answer that.
Because that's not sustainable as a model though.
No, well, in Australia, you know, they'll shut down the whole country again.
But that's but what about for these theatres and these,
Yeah, well, I can't answer for the
theatres, but you're already starting to see some of the state governments say that contact tracing as a concept will change a little bit. So they'll focus more on tracing the things they think are really important, the stuff that's dangerous.
Right.
So maybe that influences who gets in the first place, and the vaccination stuff will be an important part of that. But they're really good questions. I don't actually know how that'll play out because governments are going to be figuring all that out.
And one way or the other, we'll find out.
Yes, but it does need to be a scheme, though, to protect, organising a big festival, and then we do have a snap lockdown. All of a sudden, they're out on their own again.
And people can't get insurance for that either,
exactly.
organisers or punters.
With so much content online, it's sometimes hard to keep up with it all. And let's face it, who has the time? The Project YouTube has you covered with the stories that matter. Hit subscribe for a daily list of the news that you need to know.